Good morning, and welcome to the 2021 Virtual Highway School Good Roads Week, co-sponsored by the Association of Towns of the State of New York and the New York State LTAP Center, the Cornell Local Roads Program. Oh, still in practice. And started yet. Okay. Good morning, and welcome to the 2021. Okay. Adam, text me when you're ready.
David, go ahead. You're live.
Okay, good morning, and welcome to 2021 Virtual Highway School Good Roads Week, co-sponsored by the Association of Towns of the State of New York and New York State LTAP Center, the Roads Program. My name is David Orr. I'm the director here at the LTAP Center over at Cornell, and I want to welcome you here. We also want to thank our other partners who've helped us out, including the New York State, get this right here, the Association of Town Superintendents of Highways and the New York State County Highway Superintendents Association and the Conference of Mayors, as well as the New York State DOT and the Federal Highway Administration for their support in this very interesting year and a half. Now, I'm out here at Alfred State, actually at their pits that they use for training heavy equipment, and it is strange to not be in Ithaca for highway school, but it's a beautiful day, and each day we're going to be doing field activities across the state, traveling everywhere from here and all the way out to Washington County. We're going to be having speakers all over the place, and while this virtual school isn't our first choice, we're going to make the best of it, and with your help, we know this is going to be a great week to be together. For the Zoom webinar session, just to remind you, you won't have your camera settings, you can't use microphone, so if you want to do a Q&A, open that up, put in your questions, and that's how we'll get you information. We may put things in the chat pod just so you can download things. We highlight those. We are still looking for questions for the legal panel and actually any of the sessions you see. You can just send them to our email address, which is clrp@cornell.edu. And at the end of the school on Thursday, you're going to have an evaluation. Now, I have been asked by folks about attendance awards, Road Scholar. We're not doing Road Scholar this year. We are going to give credit for attendance, but we're not going to penalize anybody who's been able to make it this week. And just by logging into Zoom, we know you're here, but you got to make sure you use the right email address. Now, at the very end of the sessions each day, we're doing some networking, or you're going to meet with TIPS reps. I'll give you more details about that right before we get those things started just before 11 o'clock. At this time, I'm going to pass the screen over to Gregor, who is the Southampton Superintendent of Highways, and he is also the president of the Town Superintendents Association. He's going to give us a welcome and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Take it away, Alex.
Thank you, Dave. Good morning, everybody. If I may, I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Please stand, face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. And thank you, David Orr and Gary Geis, for inviting me to do today's welcoming. The last 15 months have been particularly challenging, but they've also shown us even more clearly about how important our role is to our community and their safety. In 2021, the State Town Highway Association's Executive Committee made a decision to reinvigorate our advocacy efforts and invest in digital marketing campaigns. The video the association created and the digital ads placed reiterated the importance of local transportation system on all aspects of our lives. Local roads are essential became our new slogan for the joint county and town advocacy efforts. We couldn't meet in person, but our membership of both organizations stepped up to the plate and held over 70 virtual meetings supporting increased funding for local roads, bridges, and culverts. In addition, we sent letters and emails to our legislators in the Assembly and Legislature. and a bag of potato chips to let them know chips are important. I will say your efforts were very successful and local governments received an over 30% increase in local highway aid in the enacted budget this year, as well as the full withholding back from last year. You should have already received your letter from the DOT by now with the increased allocations. Please spend the money and please pave and fix your roads. We work very hard for this. If you aren't a member of the State Town Highway Superintendents Association, please consider joining. Our biggest strength is our membership. We will be holding our fall conference in Saratoga, September 28th through October 1, and look forward to seeing everyone in person again. Again, I'd like to thank Cornell Local Program, the New York State LTAP Center for their continued partnership, and I'm excited about the programming this week. One of my favorite things about Highway School is that it puts us all on the same page. I've always enjoyed being in Ithaca and seeing 500 to 700 of my colleagues, and we all have the same concerns, the same desires, and the same needs. And that's what Highway School fills. It fills that need to give us the information that we can protect our citizens and protect our town. So I'd like to say thank you again to David and company. And I'd like to send it back to David at Alfred State. Take it away, Dave. Thank you, everyone.
Welcome back to Alfred State here in Wellsville. With me is Mark Payne, who is one of the instructors that teaches heavy highway equipment with the, what's the official degree they get?
They get a heavy equipment operations degree through Alfred State as the associate.
So Mark and I are going to be first doing a tailgate talk, looking at a truck, which you should be doing every single day when you go out before you take the truck on the road. And before I get any further, I did want to thank your colleague, Adam. He's off camera, but he helped us get everything set up. And he teaches the freshman?
Freshman, yes, freshman instructor.
He's braver than you and I.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is, this is the truck behind us. I see you got a logo for it. With Alfred.
I did.
This is an old state feeder, and it's not really road ready, is it?
No, this is something that we recently received through OGS, and this truck will go through an inspection process with us, a detailed inspection process before it is New York State inspected and put on the road. So This is something that we're just taking in. We'll head over here and I'll start my daily inspection. And we're just going to point out some things. We may find some defects with this. This is one of the early times that we're walking around this. So one of the most important things, take your keys with you. The last thing you want to do is be working on a truck or be up and under a truck or something like that and have somebody start it or move it or anything like that. So just real simple safety thing to start with. Just make sure you have your keys. As I look through the truck, generally what I do is I start from the front. I'll work from the top to the bottom, and I always try to compartmentalize as I go. I want to work in one area, top to bottom, and then work my way around. And
you can use checklists. You provided us with
absolutely.
A checklist. And I'm watch this by miracle of things. If you open your chat pod up, Adam and Amanda will give you a link if you want to download the inspection form that we're going to use as a guide today.
Right, and that's just a couple of examples of different inspection forms that are out there. Again, if you want to customize it to your truck, or if your dealer may have provided one, however you'd like to do that, or if you have a form for your agency that you like to use as well or need to use. So with this truck, again, like I said, I want to start from the top down. I'm going to check out my lights up above. I do not have the beacon lights on. The spotlight, again, I don't have that on either. But as I work my way down through, cab lights, I'll check those off. I'll look at my windshield, make sure that we're not all scratched up, make sure that it's clear, free of defects, no scratches, no chips, no issues there. I'll work my way down. I'll start looking at my plow frame. I have my truck lights on today as opposed to my plow lights, so I'm going to check those. if I was going to do this and head out on the road, again, I would put plow lights on and just make sure that everything is good there. I will work down through. This truck, you'll notice, does not have a New York State inspection sticker on it. Again, we just took this truck in. This is going to be one that we are going to send through our truck and diesel program, have them go through, inspect it, and then move it on into the actual fleet usage. Go down through, check my lights, no cuts, cracks, defects, nothing major there. Again, tires, same thing, cuts, cracks, defects. This truck has a front mounted PTO or hydraulic pump. I want to check my hydraulics, make sure that we don't have any leaks. And while I'm down here, I'm going to look underneath the truck and just see that there are no leaks on the ground underneath the truck as well. Pins for the actual plow frame, I want to make sure that they're in and safety devices are in for that. The last thing I want to do is have the plow frame tilt down while I'm going down the road. I have the bull nose down and pinned in the summer configuration. Hopefully we don't need the plows for a few days.
Wow. Okay. So as we go around, I see you've got the bulldog. That's important.
Yes, bulldog is always important. Yes, indeed. So this truck is an 09. It's lived its life in Region 4 DOT, and it actually runs pretty good. We have ran it here at the pit just a little bit just to see what it's like, see if there's any major flaws or anything like that. And it does run and drive pretty good. I'm going to look back in here. I'm going to kind of skip down and I'm going to work an underneath. And as I work an underneath, I'm going to check my steering boxes. I'm looking for any major rust trails that would indicate anything that is loose. Obviously, this truck has lived its life in the salt, so we have rust on here, but I'm looking for those trails, those telltale signs. Any cracks or anything like that, I would be looking at my springs. I would also be looking at my U-bolts, making sure that they're all in good shape. I've got some grease points there that I would be paying attention to as well.
How often do you grease those?
So in snow and ice usage, I would like to see them greased after every storm to make sure that we're flushing any water or anything like that, purging any impurities. And in summer use, depending on how hard you're using it. Now, in some cases, the trucks are attenuator trucks or something like that. They may sit a long time. You would do that on your regular monthly maintenance schedule or regular schedule. If you're using the truck heavy, obviously you're going to grease it more often than if you're not. So it's based on your usage. And again, the manufacturer recommends certain intervals as well. So moving on along, inside of the tire, I would put my head back and under there. I would check the inside of the tire, look for any grease or anything like that, indicating oil or a grease seal that may have went. Check my brakes, things. I would also be checking the backside of the tire itself. Be checking across the tire tread. Front should be 430 seconds, rear should be 230 seconds, no caps on the front, obviously. And in the wintertime, you obviously want a little more tire tread than that. You have a lot of weight, a lot of load up here that you're dealing with between the wing, the plow, and everything else. You definitely want to make sure your front tires, your steers are in very good condition. Coming down through, I would be checking my my rim itself, any cracks or anything like that. Non-factory welds, that's not allowed as well. And making sure that my valve stem cap is on and it is a steel cap. Check all the lug nuts, looking again for rust trails or anything that could indicate a loose condition. Now, as I moved to this area, I obviously went right in here and started right in here. Some of your trucks may have a butterfly in the hood on this side, or it may have access port that you need to get into to check your under the hood items like your engine oil, coolants, belts, things like that. This truck, it's on the other side. These vents, I always want to make sure that those are free of any obstructions or anything like that. And I also want to make sure that my hood is latched as I'm in this area right here. And again, I'm taking a closer look at my windshield just to make sure there's no scrapes or wiper marks or anything like that as we move forward. So let's move to the next area. I generally compartmentalize the cab area as well. So here, I'm going to look at my mirror bracket, make sure that we're in good shape there. I'm going to check my mirrors. Now this one's a little loose, so we would get that adjusted and then snug that up a little bit. This one appears to be in pretty good shape. And check my bracketry there, check my door, make sure that my door works. Now, you'll see I have my fire extinguisher just sitting there. Now that fire extinguisher usually comes out for an inspection throughout the summer here at the college. The truck's not moving, so we take them out and get those inspected and get everything set up. Grab handles, you want to make sure that they are tight and in good condition. You want to make sure that this handle up here is in good condition. And then this truck, being a DOT truck, has some plow information in here on the dash and how you would set your plow up. And that's kind of a handy thing to have with the students. So again, we look down through there, we've checked our glass is in good shape, check the door, make sure that latch is working right. Steps. Want to make sure that the steps are going to be able to hold me as I try to climb in and out of the cab. Underneath here, we have exhaust components. We also have a filter for that exhaust, making sure that the wires and things like that aren't getting close to the hot exhaust, making sure that we don't have any obvious leaks. And just looking back and underneath here, making sure our bracketry on the frame is all in good condition and not ready to rust out. We have our air tanks here. Now you can see that these air tanks are starting to show some signs, and this is probably something that we're going to end up replacing while it's with us, especially with that rust. Now this is pretty significant rust in here. And so yeah, we'll probably be watching that and most likely having to replace that at some point. And while I'm right here, I can see the bracket for the fender or for the mud flap. And I just want to check that, make sure my mud flap is in good condition. So at this point here, I can look up and I look at my wing tower. Now I kind of skirted right around there. I want to look at my wing tower. I want to look at my mirrors, make sure we're in good condition there. And you can see that they have the bungee cord hooked on to the slide. Most likely we'll get that hooked back up and get the pin out of there so that that's not coming out or bouncing out and causing any damage any place. So as I move back a little bit further, wing light in good condition, pretty solidly mounted still. The mount's in good shape. Somebody has added an extra flap there to keep the shine out of the mirrors. Payne for the wing looks to be in pretty good condition. This guy right here probably shouldn't be living there as we're driving up and down the road. So we'll probably get that out of there, and we'll also most likely try to secure this back in to the actual slide for the wing post.
You don't want a loose chain swinging around when you're driving?
I know, it's crazy, right? Yeah, no, we'd like to get that secured. While we're right here, I skipped over it, but I also am tapping on the exhaust, making sure the heat shield's in place, making sure that's not going to fall off, making sure the exhaust looks as though it's in good condition. I'm checking the elbow back down around here. So right in this area behind the cab, this wing post. Now, most of the trucks that I had while I was with DOT had the patrol wings, the shorter posts. I know that a lot of municipalities still run this setup as their main setup. So again, just some things to look at and check out. As we move forward, we also have our Tarp system here. The crank is inside the box, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. We have the liquid tank here that's all been drained, and obviously the valves are open to make sure after they drained it to let everything dry out inside there. On this box, as I look down the side of the box, one of the main things I want to look at across the top of my board, and this is pretty much every time I get a load, I want to make sure that I don't have rocks hanging up there or anything like that. The last thing you want to do is have a windshield claim. It's just not fun. So 5 minutes, you can walk down through there. You know, a lot of folks carry a hammer in the truck with them. A lot of times I would reach up with a hammer and I would run the hammer along the top just to knock any of the rocks back in. Not so much in a hammering motion, but just let it slide across the top of the board to get any stones that I might not have seen. As we move further back here, we have this toolbox, and I always get a kick out of these boxes. Now, this box has lived on this truck pretty much all its life, and you've got the front tire there, so you know that you have salt spray coming to this box, right? One of the big things, just maintaining it so that it actually works correctly. Now, inside the box, it's nasty. We haven't cleaned it out yet, but just making sure that the hinge works right, putting a little lube on there and taking care of it, and making sure that the latch works nice. That was one of the big things that impressed me when this truck showed up there on the job site, is how well that worked. So mud flap brackets and mud flaps, making sure they're in good shape, making sure that there's no rips or anything, making sure the hardware is still in place there. Now, this is most likely recently been changed. The hardware is in really good shape there, as you can see, and it has that nice bracket. They're really, you know, there's not much reason that it should get knocked off. Some more spray deflectors and things like that. Again, just make sure it's in good shape, not riding down on the tire, not ready to fall off as you're going down the road. When we get to the tandems and the duals, I'm going to talk about a lot of the things that I'm doing. I'll work my way from the inside to the outside. And again, while I'm backing underneath there, I would be looking for any leaks and underneath the truck. I'd also be looking for leaks behind the tire, making sure that we don't have any oils or anything running out of the rear end. On the inside of the tire, I'm looking for any cuts, scrapes, abrasions, anything like that that may indicate that we've got a problem. Across the tread, again, looking for a minimum of 230 seconds. Most applications, you guys know, you're going to run really good tires. So you want to make sure that your treads are all in good shape. Nothing indicate that somebody's spinning or chewing things up. In between the duals. This time of year, I know there's been some ditching going on and things like that. Just checking in between the duals when you're backing into an area to dump off that ditch material. You never know when there's going to be a rock that's just the right size to get caught in between. That really causes a lot of havoc out there. So making sure that you're looking in between there, making sure that none of those sidewalls have been damaged by a rock that you may have missed. And again, just making sure that there are no rocks in between the duals doing any damage. That's a pretty big deal. Working my way out, again, I'm looking in between there for the rocks, and I'm looking at the rim condition, making sure everything's seated the way it should be, making sure that the valve stem on the inside is capped properly and not damaged, hasn't been hit by a rock or anything like that, or torn up from mud, that sort of thing. Work my way across this tire, same way as what I just explained on the inside. I'm looking for the tread depth. I'm looking for any major spinning indications or anything like that. Cuts, scrapes, abrasions, where the cap may be separating and coming off. Outside, we're looking again at the outer part of the tire. We're going to check this sidewall for cuts, scrapes, abrasions, and looking for any damage or defects. Rim, just like on the front, any welds other than factory welds are not allowed, so you're looking for anything like that. Cracks. As you move in, you're going to check the valve stem, make sure the cap is a metal cap. You're going to grab those lug nuts and make sure that those lug nuts are all tight. Make sure we have no rust trails coming out of those lug nuts. And coming up to the hub itself, making sure the axle seal is still in good shape and making sure everything is tightened up. So that's that process right there will be repeated on the back. You'll also check your rear suspension. If you're running air suspension as opposed to spring, you'll be checking those airbags, making sure that you don't have any major cuts or nicks or abrasions or rub marks or anything like that that would indicate that you have a bad bag. Any air leaks back there would definitely be something noteworthy. And then on this truck with the springs, you're looking at the U-bolts, you're looking at the springs. And again, you're looking for any cracks or anything like that that would indicate a problem. So as we move further back, again, I look at the side of my box. I'm looking at my reflectors, making sure my lights and reflectors are in place. Mud flap again.
Here for you, Mark.
What's that?
Stone in the tread. Got a stone.
Yeah, we've got some stones in the tread, and you can't always take that or worry too much about those small stones. But again, if you can get them out, one less thing. On the mud flaps themselves, making sure they're in good shape, making sure they're not getting ripped off. If you are in an area where you're going to be backing up to a ditching pile and you don't have a machine on site to buck those piles up and you're trying to get your truck in there tight, just making sure that your mud flap is mounted in such a way that it's not going to get against the tire and rip, or that you can chain it up and have it out of the way. It's always nice not to have to deal with that at the beginning or middle or end of the day. Lights, now this one here, most likely we'll replace this light box. We'll also straighten this bracket and try to get that so that it's actually hanging properly again. Now this has lights mounted right in the box. We're going to look at those as well and make sure that the LEDs are working properly, make sure that everything is where it should be. As I come into this corner, I'm also looking at the tailgate at this point. I want to make sure that my tailgate pin is in place, the locking pin is in place for it. And I also want to check my chains for my tailgate, my spreader chains. This here will most likely end up taking this spreader chain right off of the truck. We really don't use it all that often. We'll probably take it and put it inside the box so that it doesn't get lost. Now it looks as though it's loose up there. It just hangs here. It would just hang. So we'll put it in the box and try to avoid losing that at all costs. Across the top of the tailgate, anything that may be sitting there, we're looking at that. And we're also looking at the actual apron on the truck. Now, this is a combination body. It's got the chain already in it. We've got the pan mounted in here so that we can put material on it and dump it out easier, making sure that the locking pins are in that pan. That's another thing that we're looking for, making sure that we have the coal chute all the way closed. But look at this. So we have this little space right here. Now, that's something that we'll most likely work on we'll most likely work towards putting a flap of some sort, probably some mud flap material or something like that, or even a piece of steel in there. I believe we actually have a piece of steel for it right up in the toolbox. But again, it's just something that we need to set up on the truck and just have that taken care of. So again, I'm looking all the way across. I'm looking at my lights on this side as well, making sure everything's in good shape, taking a look at my actual dogs for my tailgate and making sure that they actually lock properly and they're in good shape as well. As I look down lower on this truck, once we get down here to the frame, you can see some salt actually still laying in here where we need to get it cleaned up. And there's some work to do here. Hydraulic connections for the spinner right there. We'll have to do some work with those as well. And you can see this truck had some extra bracketry mounted on it. So it looks as though it was set up for possibly an attenuator or something, some other attachment throughout its lifetime. So as we look across the back, again, you know, you check across that tailgate, and as you step back here a little bit, you can actually see that it's angled so that it will drop some of that material. Any of the welds that you see back here, you want to take a look at. They've welded a D-ring into the center to lift that tailgate off, which is pretty handy. And you also want to look at those welds and just make sure they're in good shape before you really trust it and take the tailgate off with that. We can move around to this side of the truck, and as we do that, now we're probably going to get some light issue here. We'll jump up here in the shade so we get our camera back into the shade as well. Pretty much the same program all the way down through here. We have a battery box here. Uh-oh.
That's not a battery box.
Well, it used to be a battery box. It's half of it now. It's just a battery tray, right? So again, some things that we need to take care of. I happen to know this truck did come with all those parts. No knocks to OGS or DOT or anybody like that. The truck came with all the parts. We actually had to use it on another truck, so we borrowed it from this one as we're ordering one in. So as we move forward, again, we're checking the frame, we're checking the suspension, we're checking the tires, we're looking for any possible defects, anything that's going to ruin our day as we move along here. Our dump box seems to be in pretty shape. Just side here, pretty good. And our head tank, so that looks pretty good. And I there and I sight to the head and right about there.
Mark? I need to stay.
Okay. All right. Back up a little bit here. At this point, we could open it up for questions as we move backwards. And anything from the audience. All right. Yeah, if we have any questions that I can answer, that would be great.
So Adam, anybody put any questions in the Q&A?
Yes, we do. We have a couple questions.
Okay, great. Repeat them for us then.
All right, I'll go ahead and read the first one from Edwin Starwicks. Edwin, I'm sorry if I butchered your name there. So, do you recommend using a loose wheel nut indicator on wheel nuts as part of the inspection process?
Loose wheel nut indicator, and I believe what you're referring to is similar to what the buses run and some of the bigger fleets run as a just an indicator that sticks on there. I have no strong feelings one way or the other on those. Basically with those, I think they're a nice idea. For my application, I don't feel that they would work well. I would rather be able to teach the students to actually look at those things and get a hold of them and, you know, get right in there with them. So I have no recommendation one way or the other. I'm sorry, I just don't have experience with them. How about the next question, Adam?
All right. Do plow trucks have to be changed out after a certain number of years, or do you just keep repairing until they are no longer repairable?
That is based on your agency and your funding and a lot of other things. This truck right here is a hand-me-down from New York State DOT. They have a pretty awesome program, and through OGS and some trades and things like that, I'm able to utilize these for the students here at the school.
What year is this?
This one is an 09.
So it's still a 12-year-old truck.
It is. It's a 12-year-old truck, and to run that every day for your plow route and stuff like that, DOT has determined that they don't want to do that anymore. For me, I don't have a road that I have to plow for a resident at 3 a.m. So I'm more than happy to utilize it here. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
We know there are trucks out there that are 30 years old that's being used, but they've got to be maintained.
Absolutely. How about the next question, Adam?
All right. No, those were the two.
Those were our two questions.
Yep.
Well, that's good. Good timing anyway. So
absolutely.
Thanks. So it's truck inspection. It actually takes less time to do it in real life than it did here because we stopped and looked at everything. And it's a good habit to get a form, to write these things down, document things, be in pretty good shape.
If I was going to walk around this truck, for me on a normal day, 5 to 10 minutes. You know, you as an operator, if you're using the same piece of equipment over and over and over again, obviously you can spot defects really quick. Hey, it wasn't like that yesterday, or it hasn't been like that for the last year, and now it is. What's going on? If you are slip seating or moving between pieces, then you may want to spend a little bit more time with it. You know, your name is going on that documentation. You want to make sure that it's right before you leave. And, you know, I always kind of joked about it when I worked with DOT. I was a big one for truck inspection because honestly, I knew there wasn't a lot of insulation in those cabs, and I did not want to sit on the side of a road at 0 degrees outside for very long while I wait for the mechanic to come fix my truck.
Which is the last reminder to get to our next session, and that is make sure before you leave, you fuel the truck up.
Yes, absolutely. So,
well, thanks again for walking us through a truck inspection.
Absolutely.
We're now going to talk about grader operations. So we have our grader here. We'll get out of the way so our cameraman, Nick Kuzmic, can show you the grader. So Mark's going to go over and hop in the grader, and he's going to show us 3 different applications. We're going to talk a little bit about the grader as he goes over there. So
Okay, great.
I'll
So-
join you part way, and since I'm now getting active, I'm going to take my tie off here.
So the grader was inspected this morning. I've already had it running this morning. I am going to do just a real quick walk around here. I want to walk around behind, just look for any leaks or anything like that, make sure nobody's around it. And I want to make sure that my battery switch is on. So as I move back, I'm happy with what I've seen on the other side. Big thing for your operators, big thing for everybody, 3 points of contact as you move in and out of the equipment. I'm a huge proponent for that, mainly because as a kid, I really wasn't a huge proponent for that. So now my knees are telling me I should have been. All right.
Seatbelt on, good thing to do.
Yep.
Now in the chat pod, you'll also see a link that Marcus sent us for some grader and other equipment operations. You may want to download those and look at those later on. Very good information there. It's actually a lot from State DOT, some other things that the folks here at Alfred State have put together to do the training program.
Absolutely.
So
And I would be remiss if I didn't say some of those links were borrowed from our friends in Nebraska and things like that. So they, I had quite an experience with them here a couple of years ago before COVID, where I was able to visit them, and they were, they have a really interesting grader operations program. And like I said, there's some videos on YouTube and things like that that talk more about the techniques and how they do business out there. So right now,
Okay.
this grader is 1986 John Deere. It's one that, again, it's an OGS hand-me-down from DOT, and we're more than happy to have it. It's a pretty low-hour machine, and like I said, it's something that the students really enjoy. And usually every year I have a few students that are very interested in the operation of this machine. So at this point, I'm going to back up a little bit. And I am also going to articulate the grader to start getting us into line for the first part of this session.
Which is going to be a cutting. And for those who do articulation, you're essentially offsetting the wheels so that you can actually see how the wheels in there not parallel with each other. A couple of reasons for that. Go ahead and explain that for folks, Mark. Why did you do that?
So basically what I'm trying to do here is I am trying to set myself up so that the windrow will dump in between the rear wheels. And what I'm looking at here is I am looking at kind of changing some of my grader settings. Now I have a saddle that will move back and forth. And what I do is I generally run this saddle next to the last pin. So I'm not going full, I'm not going fully out with it, but I am moving it some, just trying to offset it into the ditch a little bit. One thing, I guess a disclaimer here, I'm going to show you 3 different settings and 3 different runs. The settings themselves, if I visited 10 different townships in the state, I would have 10 different opinions on how to set up your grader and how somebody likes their road cut. So this is just a couple of suggestions that may or may not be of interest to you, and you can make your own determination from there. So that's my general disclaimer with this whole thing. I'm a big proponent for using float. I like to get my blade kind of neutralized on the ground, and then I can start making small adjustments from there. Now I've got a hole in my course here, so you're going to see me make a few adjustments as I move forward. I have articulated the grader. I have leaned the wheels up the hill to help hold me in place. I have offset my blade to the ditch side. I have angled my blade so that my discharge is in underneath my grader, and I have rolled the blade back just a little bit. And as I did that, the reason why I did that is I want to hook that material, and I actually want it to carry up the hill. So I'm going to start rolling ahead here real slow and just kind of get lined up the rest of the way and see if we can get a little bit of material here.
So this is a cutting path. And as we get towards the camera, you'll actually be able to see how the blade is set. And it's actually away from the center of the circle, moved over to the left, offset, as you said. And the windrow that he'll generate, right about now, he starts to generate, will actually go between the wheels of the grader. And that works out real well.
Right.
Any down
Anything that you
pressure on your
do,
blade?
very minimal at this point, just because this grader is just a four-wheel drive grader. I'm not going to try to take a huge cut and spin the wheels. And again, I just want to grab this material and start pulling it up. And one of the things, and I know David is getting ready to ask here, so I'm going to go right ahead with it. One of the big things, when I get done with a cut like that, what I try to show the guys is, hey, you know, grab that material and pull it up out. Why leave a big windrow right there in the ditch? Let's pull that material up out if you have the space for it and can do the transition. So that's why I did what I did, and I hooked it on around there.
Mark,
You'll see
right
I'm
here.
Go ahead, David.
Why don't you stop right there and show how the blade moves back and forth so folks can see that on the camera.
Okay. Set my brake here real quick. So yeah, I am, you know, I've got my up and down, obviously. I have this ability here to change. Now, if I want to grab a windrow and actually transport it, I would run it back a ways and actually move that material up the blade. If I'm looking to spread or rake or something like that, I'm going to rock that blade up like this. And I'm going to have my circle set a little bit flatter. And obviously I would have that moved in. When it comes to moving the saddle, I've got to move a pin right now. So I'm going to put that in neutral or in float, let that down. I try to take all that pressure off that saddle. That's one of the big things I try to show my guys. Hey, let's get the pressure off of it and let's just kind of go easy with it. Because that right there is what happens when you don't have any pressure or you have it up in the air and you try to move it. So I start out at the next to the last hole. Basically what I'm looking at is outside of my windshield, I have an indicator on there that shows me where or what pin I am close to as I move that saddle back and forth. And right here, I get indicators inside the cab when that locks up. So that's what I'm looking at right there. Okay, so back into reverse. And I'm going
Okay,
to
so now you're going to back up. You're doing a more of a grading path, grading your shoulder or travel road, grading the roadway itself. Obviously, you're not going to normally be able to do this in a single path. And this isn't a production cut. We're just illustrating the activities today. In production,
right.
You can do everything set and be able to run pretty quick.
Yeah, if you were looking at production, you would obviously be doing things a little bit differently. This is more just, hey, these are 3 settings that we like to show as we move forward. Now, one of the things that I'm looking for right now is I'm looking at my articulation gauge. I'm also looking at where my blade is going to land here. And I want to make sure that I get my windrow outside of my rear tires. So I'm looking at this. I'm going to pull this back up and going to side shift my circle back a little bit just to make sure that I get that windrow where I want it.
So this time you want the windrow all the way to the other side of the bridge.
Right. I am going to run that windrow on the outside of my tandem this time. And so I'm setting up for that. All right, so here we go with round number 2. Now I'm looking at the windrow that I just made, and I've got that lined up on the inside of my front tires. And again, I'm not trying to make a huge cut here, not trying to be real crazy. Just to illustrate setting.
And you're
Now,
going to get a small windrow. Obviously, you probably take 2 passes if you're doing this for the main line road.
Right, and I would probably have this set up just a little bit different so that that windrow actually made it to the end of my blade. Right now, I feel as though I'm probably bulldozing some material there. And
again, you turned out.
Yeah, I just turned out just so I didn't leave that material there. So
now, when you're grading like this, you're doing a gravel road, you wind up with that windrow between the 2 sides. How do you take care of that windrow?
Well, and that's a good point. So when we're dealing with that windrow, some folks will flatten their blade out and they will attempt to just blow the windrow back off and try to spread it. Like say I pulled my two sides up into the crown and I end up with a windrow. Well, now I just flatten my blade and try to run right down the middle. And you'll have some mixed results with that. Some folks have found that that's not a real great way to do business. Basically, you're tabletop in the center of your road. And now I've got a spot for water to sit. And we all know that water is the enemy. So if I have water sitting there, well, what's going to happen? And David, this is where your gravel roads maintenance manual, I believe, would come in.
You're going to create potholes. Exactly.
Right.
That's actually one of the interesting things. That was actually a research project that was done by our first director, started in 1951, and showed that a flat section of gravel road leads to potholes. And so if you cut that windrow with the grader, you're probably going to create a pothole series. So better off to go in there with a York rake, something light, and not cut it.
Right.
Okay,
and
so our last
idea.
Go ahead.
The idea is, potholes create something else, and that's angry residents. And nobody likes an angry resident on a rural gravel road, so we're trying to avoid that at all costs.
Okay.
So go ahead with our last setting here. Let's talk about
our last
that.
setting talking about is blading a roadway, and we're going to be trying to blade or drag the roadway. We used to do it with literally a log squared off, and then we would drag it on the road to sort of semi-compact the surface down. We do that now with the grader, and you can see we're going to be flattening that angle out, so we're dragging. It's the same thing. Okay, go ahead, Mark.
Now at this point, just to give you a little bit better visual, I'm running a little more down pressure than I normally would. So you'll see off of this left side, I'll create a windrow, which is obviously not ideal for what we're trying to do. So again, we want to drag this roadway. We want to smooth all this out. And here we go. Now at this point, what I've done, just to kind of recap on the settings, because we were talking about some other things. As I recap on the settings, I took my saddle pin out. I moved that back to the center. I centered up my circle and underneath the frame of the grader, flattened out my angle, and I also rocked my blade ahead so that my moldboard was closer to a 90-degree angle up and down. So that was the recap there. Some big things when you're working with newer grader operators, some big things to remind them, like what's happening right in front of my grader right now, and I'm going to pull back ahead, Nick, so that you're ready to run the camera. As I pull up onto that, you know, talk to your grader operators, your new guys, and say, hey, you know, just remember that whatever those front wheels are doing, your blade is part of that. It's reacting the whole time. So try to keep that in mind. Try to keep things smooth if you possibly can. Try to work with that. As far as windrow placement and trying to articulate and keep things either to the inside or the outside of the tires. One of the big things I find with the newer folks running the grader is that they'll miss that and they will have some difficulties because they'll be going along and all of a sudden they're on loose material, they're losing traction, having a very difficult time, you know, keeping the grader going. And also the grader's doing this number, you know, side to side, and you're having a real hard time keeping the blade where you want it as well. So again, those are a few things on that. So
on those 3 passes, we were just showing folks settings, stuff like that. In production work, how fast would you be going for each of those? So we'll start, how fast would you be going when you're cutting?
So when I'm cutting, I would probably run, you know, 3 to 5 miles an hour, maybe a little bit faster, depending on the material. The material is going to be the major determining factor. The other thing that's going to change how you're going to run your grader is going to be the cutting edge itself. You know, if you're a township that has the carbide piece on your cutting edge, you're going to talk to that cutting edge manufacturer and say, okay, what's going to be the best setting? How is this going to work really well for my application? And they're going to be able to talk about that. When there's some links to some material that Dave mentioned earlier, and in that material, you'll see 2 or 3 different recommendations. There's actually a chart in one of the files that will give you all the speeds that you would be looking at. The big thing for your grader operator, make sure he's comfortable with whatever he's doing. You know, the speed of the grader is going to be determined by how fast he can process what's happening with the grader and underneath the machine. So if that grader operator maybe is not as experienced or maybe is, you know, really trying to produce a nice quality product, they may slow down. So it may vary your production rate in that way. So how are we doing on time, Dave?
We're about 22 after. We got about 8 minutes before we're going to take our break. So, how many questions do we have in, Adam?
We have 1 question.
We have 1 question.
But I want to remind everybody that this is a great time to get some in. So send us your questions and we'll get them out there.
So we didn't quite answer 1 question. I want to make sure people remember. For the dragging, how fast did you go?
During the dragging, I was obviously I was in first gear, just going along nice and slow. During the dragging, based on the material and things like that, you may get up around 5 miles an hour, maybe. I
like them to not going faster than I can walk. So
right, you want to
not that fast. I walk fast.
Right. The big thing is that you want to make sure that you're producing a nice surface. You know, your speed. Very rarely do I worry so much about my speed. I'm more worried about the surface that I'm actually producing at the end of the day. So
good, fast, and cheap. Pickany too.
Absolutely. So any other, you know, any questions, Adam? You want to read off that question if it's maybe something I can answer right here from the seat?
Yeah, maybe just a simple one, maybe a perspective thing. I'm not sure, but an attendee is asking, why are the front tires on the grader on backwards?
Yes, the front tires backwards. With this machine here, actually, it came from DOT that way, and we kept that. It was more of just a traction, and it seems to work well. I'm sure that there is a reason for it in the grader manuals, but that's one I have not came across yet.
Well, it probably makes a difference in that that's not an all-wheel drive.
Right, yes, this is not an all-wheel drive machine. And generally, if it would be an all-wheel drive machine, they would definitely be pointed forward.
Any other questions? And they're Adam.
That is all we have at this point. Oh, wait a
Okay.
minute. Hold on. Something just popped up.
Here we go.
All right. What are the main areas you are looking at while grading? The blade at both ends, the gauges, the road in front?
With me, I am looking between the road in front, and I am also looking at the grader blade and what I have happening on either end. I'm trying to keep track of the windrow is my big thing. I may adjust my steering just a little bit, but you'll see that I don't spend a lot of time with my hand on the steering wheel, other than maybe as a rest or something like that. I'm gonna drag some of this rock out of here while I'm chatting here. But, you know, the big thing is I am looking at my blade now. Right now, I can see I've got a low spot on the uphill side. I can see daylight and underneath it. But, you know, I'm just looking to see what kind of surface I'm putting behind the blade and what's coming in front of it. So those are a couple of the high spots, a couple of the things I'm looking for.
Any other questions, Adam? I've got one for Mark, but it's like if the audience first. So,
No more questions in the Q&A right now.
so Mark, when you're doing your grading, do you like to have a spotter to check your grade as you're going?
So a spotter is really handy because they have a different perspective than I will inside the machine. And so a spotter does make that nice. And if if on staff you do have a newer grader operator, maybe being out there to help them get a good visual. And for me, I personally, I am not one that sits in the grader seat every day, as most everybody can tell. But it is nice. You know, you and I had a little back and forth here recently about it, and we talked about grader angles and blade angles and things like that. You can look at the side of the blade and actually see what that cutting edge is doing a lot easier than I can. So
Yeah, the audience
it's nice.
can see that it's slightly cut right now.
Right, and it's nice because we can have a conversation and I can say, okay, well, hey, you know, does this look better or, you know, worse, or what do you think? You know, so that spotter does play a big role in that. It's nice to have, especially as you are working with a newer operator, as they're learning their marks. And by learning their marks, what I'm saying is your perspective from the seat looking at the blade, you need to learn what that blade looks like in the proper orientation. And you burn that into your memory, and that's what you go back to every time, you know. No different than with a wheel loader, you're looking at a mark, either it's something the manufacturer put there or something you've picked out to set the blade or the bucket level. You know, it's the same type of concept.
Cool.
So,
Any other questions, Adam?
Nope, no more questions at this time.
Well, I think we're close here. It's like 28 after, I think.
Yes.
Okay. Well, you know, nope. There's no point in us just holding people. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take our break this morning. So we're going to be breaking until 10 a.m. in which you're going to be hearing from the state, and they're going to be talking about New York State Administered aid to localities, which includes not only CHIPS and emergency winter recovery, but also the new funding for touring routes and other things like that. So please join us at 10 o'clock. The link will stay active. We'll just have slides showing the upcoming activities. And with that, I want to give a great thanks to Adam and Mark here at Alfred State. Thanks to Nick behind the camera, and Adam and Amanda and Melissa and Barbara, who are behind the scenes, not in front, but making sure everything works for us so smoothly. See y'all at 10 o'clock. Thanks. Take care.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Highway School on this fine morning on Monday. Coming to you from 50 Wolf Road. We are not on location with David today. This is Diane Keneally from the New York State Department of Transportation. I'm joined today by Margaret Nairns, Steve Ainspan, Dawn Arnold, Heather Gephardt, and Doreen Halsoppel. And with that, today's presentation is going to cover aid to localities for highway and bridge programs. A few instructions for today. We would like you to hold your questions till the end. However, you may enter them in the chat, the Q&A, and we will monitor that throughout the session, and we will answer your questions when we get to the end of the presentation. We'd like to thank Cornell Local Roads for hosting and coordinating today's session. We would also like to invite you to attend a Meet Your CHIPS rep on Thursday. So Adam's going to launch a poll over the next slide or two, and we would like you to take that time to answer. So we would like to know if you will plan to attend our session on Thursday. And that way we can plan for your attendance. So with that, I'll go over the overview for today's presentation. So today we're going to cover the aid to localities apportionments that were provided through the state fiscal year 2021-22 budget. We're going to cover the Consolidated Local Street and Highway Improvement Program. We'll cover the Paved New York Program, Extreme Winter Recovery Program, the new program, State Touring Routes. We will cover a number of requirements that you must comply with, including the Americans with Disabilities Act, Complete Streets Act, and all of the forms and supporting documentation required for you to receive your reimbursement requests. There are other key program requirements that we will cover, and then we will give you program contact information for your CHIPS reps and main office support. So aid to localities provides direct state aid to local governments for highway and bridge projects so that you can perform repairs, rehabilitation, and reconstruction of those facilities. These funds are provided in addition to the core federal aid projects that you may undertake through the statewide transportation improvement program. So what funding was provided in this year's state budget? Well, it included $538.1 million for the Consolidated Local Street and Highway Improvement Program, or better known as the CHIPS program. This is a $100 million increase over last year's state fiscal budget. This year, $150 million has been provided to the Paved New York program. This is a $50 million increase over last year's budget. $100 million was provided through the Extreme Winter Recovery Program, a $35 million increase over the state fiscal year 2021 budget. And then this year, an additional program, the State Touring Route Program, was provided $100 million, and we will discuss that in greater detail later in the presentation. Also, currently, $200 million has been made available to the Bridge New York program. This was announced in January of 2021. I'd like to note that there was $100 million provided for each year, and we are soliciting 2 years of funding at this time. Deadlines for bridge applications is June 9th, so closing soon. And with that, I'm going to now turn it over to Margaret Nairns, who's going to talk to us about the CHIPS program.
Thanks, Diane. Good morning, everybody. The CHIPS program provides state funds to municipalities to support the construction and repair of highways and bridges and other facilities not on the state system. Eligible projects must have a 10-year service life, except these 4 preventative maintenance activities, which are authorized by statute. And everyone should have already received their letters for their new fiscal year's apportionment and rollover balances. As in past years, payments for this fiscal year are scheduled to take place on or about the 15th of June, September, December, and March. So CHIPS funding is apportioned annually through the state budget. Previous year's balances are reappropriated and then rolled over. We encourage municipalities to minimize their accumulation of rollover funds. However, some municipalities may choose to save up their funds from year to year to expend on a large project. The state fiscal year starts on April 1st, and then quarterly payments start in June. On the CHIPS website, you can find a calendar of dates with cutoff expenditure and submission due dates. Payments are made by the Office of the State Comptroller, and to request reimbursement for CHIPS, you're going to use the CP73 reimbursement request form that's found on the CHIPS website. Remember that the form needs to be typed and printed and then signed, and preferably emailed to your regional CHIPS coordinator. And just a note that with the onset of COVID, DOT made electronic submission option available for CHIPS. And we hope this has been helpful for everyone and has aided you in getting your reimbursement requests in. So CHIPS eligible activities include highway resurfacing, highway reconstruction, bridge and culvert rehabilitation, and bridge and culvert replacement. We also reimburse for other projects, including the installation of traffic control devices, guide rail, and highway lighting, the construction of highway garages and barns and commuter park and ride lots, and also the purchase of transportation equipment with a service life of 10 years or more. Just a note that if you're going to purchase equipment, it does require DOT approval. Some CHIPS ineligible activities include pothole repairs, crack sealing, snow removal and street cleaning, brush and weed control, projects on state highways, also parking lots which do not primarily serve a mass transportation commuter parking purpose. Some examples would be parking for a municipal building, a school, or a ball field, or retail shopping. And sanitary sewers, water lines, and other utilities not impacted by a highway reconstruction project would also be ineligible. For PAVE New York, it's an enhanced assistance to local governments apportioned annually through the state budget. Unspent funds allocated in previous years will roll over into the next fiscal year. And although this program follows the same guidelines as CHIPS, it's specifically for highway resurfacing and highway reconstruction projects. You will use the CP75 form to request reimbursement under this program. The Extreme Winter Recovery Program is also an enhanced assistance to local governments apportioned annually through the state budget. Again, unspent funds allocated in previous years will roll over into the next fiscal year. The intent is to support repair to highways and bridges, and it follows the same programmatic requirements and reimbursement requirements as CHIPS. For this reimbursement under this program, you're going to use the CP74 form to request reimbursement. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the newly created State Touring Route Program. This year's budget apportioned funds to cities, towns, and villages that have capital maintenance responsibility for signed touring routes. This funding is for expenditures that occur on or after April 1st, 2021. Funds are apportioned based on the total number of signed touring route miles for which such municipality has maintenance responsibility, as determined by the local highway inventory. And those of you who are eligible to receive funding should have received a letter advising you of your apportionment. The touring route program follows the same programmatic and reimbursement requirements as CHIPS, except that the purchase of equipment will not be eligible for reimbursement. Preference should be given to roads located on a signed touring route. However, funds may be used on an eligible roadway on the local highway inventory for the municipality. The first payment for this program is going to be made in July, with the other payments at the same time as the CHIPS quarterly payments. And to request reimbursement under this program, You will use the CP 73 form. So this form has been updated to include state touring route programs. It's also used for CHIPS reimbursement.
And now we'll talk about a few of the laws that must be complied with while advancing your programs. So we'll discuss the Americans with Disabilities Act. This act is to ensure that individuals with disabilities are not excluded from programs, services, and activities that are provided by each one of your municipalities. It also requires an ADA transition plan, and it requires the installation of curb ramps where curb ramps or other barriers restrict access to sidewalks or other pedestrian walkways. So what is an ADA self-evaluation and a transition plan? Well, a self-evaluation is intended to be conducted by a municipality to identify barriers in programs and activities. It's to provide an opportunity for interested persons to participate in the process. And it helps to identify municipal funding and staff to support the commitment to prepare the evaluation and eventual transition plan. The intention of the evaluation is to collect data, to create an inventory of those facilities that might need to be altered so that they will be ADA compliant. And then to take that self-evaluation and develop it into a transition plan. This becomes a short-range planning tool for each municipality so that you can identify the items which need to be modified and develop a plan to complete those modifications. And any municipality with 50 or more people are required to develop a transition plan. Now, those 50 people include non-paid individuals as well as paid. And this transition plan needs to make sure that the self-evaluation is maintained for at least 3 years, and it needs to be available to the public as well. So when does ADA compliance required for you to incorporate in each of your projects? It has to be when it's identified that you are completing an alteration on your project. And when an alteration is identified, this requires installation of curb ramps where curbs or other barriers restrict access to sidewalks or other pedestrian walkways. Ramps must include detectable warnings, or referred to as domes, to alert vision-impaired individuals. They must be installed before or during an alteration project. So in this next slide, we'll show you an example of a non-compliant detectable warning and curb ramp. We also have an example of an appropriately installed ADA compliant curb ramp showing detectable warnings. So now, how do you know when a curb ramp needs to be installed on one of your projects? If you are completing any projects that result in the addition of new asphalt layers, in-place recycling, microsurfacing, mill and fill, a mill and overlay, a rehabilitation, reconstruction, or new construction project, all of those projects would require curb ramp installation for any work performed on that facility. So what type of work does not require curb ramps? If you're performing routine maintenance, chip seals, placing oil and stone, slurry seals, joint crack seals, or joint repairs. Those items do not require curb ramps to be installed. Another state law which we need to think about is the Complete Streets Act. It was enacted in 2011 to enhance safe and convenient access to all roadway users. Design features include, but are not limited to, sidewalks, bike lanes, crosswalks, and signage. CHIPS, Pave New York, EWR, and state touring route programs are not subject to Complete Streets requirements, except when funds are used as a match to a federal or state-funded project requiring a state-local agreement with the New York State Department of Transportation. And when determining whether Complete Streets Act applies to your project, It does not apply when bicyclists and pedestrians are prohibited by law on the facility being considered, that the cost is disproportionate to the need for bicycle and pedestrian facilities, if there is a demonstrated lack of need, and if design features would have an adverse impact on public safety. If you have a project where you're not clear on whether it applies or not, reach out to your CHIPS rep and we can obtain assistance from our ADA coordinators located throughout the state in each of our regions. So with this, I am now going to turn the presentation over to Steve Ainspan.
Thank you, Diane. On the CHIPS website, you will find the CHIPS, Pave New York, EWR, and State Touring Routes documentation checklist for your payment request. You should check off whether you're submitting a completed CP73 form if it's for a CHIPS or State Touring Route project, the CP74 if it's for an extreme winter recovery project, or a CP75 whether if it's for a Pave New York project. You should check off whether you're submitting photos of ADA compliant curb ramp installations. You should check off that proof of payment has been submitted. Invoices that are marked paid and vouchers for receipt of materials and services are not considered sufficient proof of payment that's been verified by a financial institution. You should be submitting one of the following: canceled checks to contractors, subcontractors, and vendors, or an electronic file transfer statement or email confirmation, or a bank statement, including electronic documentation, or a credit card statement. You should check off whether you've submitted record of materials and contractor invoices for the project, whether any record of equipment was used for the project, whether labor was used for the project. And I want to note that this information can be submitted in summary format using either the forms on the CHIPS website or a summary format of your municipality's choosing. On the CHIPS website, you will find examples of the supporting documentation summaries. There's one for sponsors material, one for force account equipment, one for rented equipment, and one for sponsors labor. Here's an example of one that's used for the sponsors material. If a municipality chooses to use its own rather than DOT summary reports of requested information, those reports should include a signed and dated certification statement similar to the statement that appears in the NYSDOT supporting documentation forms on the CHIPS website. Additionally, each program payment submission should not only include its own documentation checklist, but also its own summary reports of checklist information, its own set of curb ramp photos, if applicable, and its own proof of payment. If you have a CHIPS, Pave New York, Extreme Winter Recovery, and Touring Route submission for a particular quarterly payment, you should include 4 checklists, 4 sets of summary reports, 4 sets of curb ramp photos, if applicable, and 4 sets of proof of payment, 1 for each payment submission. There are several issues that could delay receipt of your reimbursement. If you don't submit the documentation checklist, if you don't submit summary reports, but only are submitting individual invoices or vouchers that may be missing requested information. If no curb ramp photos where curb ramps are clearly required, and if there's been no proof of payment. Inadequate documentation would also apply when these items are submitted, but as one set covering multiple programs, when they should be submitted as separate sets, one set for each program payment submission. Municipalities have the option of using traditional mail for submitting the reimbursement request forms and supporting documentation, or submitting via email. Since last year, we have strongly encouraged municipalities to submit their reimbursement requests via email, and guidance for these email submissions is on the CHIPS website. You simply need to scan your forms and supporting documentation and then email those to the regional DOT mailbox. Email submissions will expedite the reimbursement process and will also give your municipalities more time to process your requests. And we have a slide here which shows your regional DOT mailbox for each region. This will enable submitting to this mailbox will enable more than one regional DOT person to review your submissions if your designated regional CHIPS rep is out of the office for a period of time. So we highly encourage you to send it to that regional mailbox. The email submittals to the DOT region, again, we indicated that you should submit a separate email for each reimbursement program. Include the municipality's name in the subject line, and if the file is too large, you should send multiple emails, keeping each below the size limit, and indicate in the subject line how many emails are included for the submission. Your supporting documents should include a descriptive title for each attachment. This aids us in the tracking of submittal files. For separated large files, you should indicate how many files make up the submission. For example, submission 1 of 3. Here we have a slide showing an example of a good email submission. I'd now like to discuss some of the key program requirements. The summary info that we talked about may use either the summary forms on the CHIPS website or a format of your municipality's choosing. These are reimbursement programs. The reimbursement requests must be submitted within 18 months of project expenditures, and the record retention period for these programs is 36 years. We had indicated earlier that invoices are not a valid proof of payment. We require canceled checks, EFT statements, bank or credit card statements, and be sure to cross off any sensitive account information that would appear on credit card or bank statements before submitting those documents. You must provide the requested information in the website's payment documentation checklist. And we went over those requirements. Photos of ADA compliant curb ramps, summaries of equipment, labor, and materials that are used for the projects. And finally, you may roll your funds forward from one fiscal year to another in order to undertake a larger capital project. Eligible project activities, unless otherwise noted, must have a service life of 10 years or more. General roadway operations and maintenance expenses are not eligible. For example, crack sealing and mowing. These would not be eligible for CHIPS reimbursement. Equipment purchases with a minimum 10-year service life are eligible. For example, the purchase of an excavator or a plow truck. Hourly equipment rates may be reimbursed for municipally owned equipment as part of an eligible capital project. Other key program requirements that you need to be aware of. Construction work that exceeds $350,000 must be competitively bid in accordance with general municipal law. The state may provide reimbursement for stockpiled materials, but only when those materials have been physically placed as part of a specific eligible project. And finally, municipalities must adopt state or federally recognized highway, bridge design, and construction standards.
And with that, I'll take the slides back over. So right now, we're sharing with you a number of resources that may be helpful to you. So these are sites that are associated with the Federal Highway Administration, the first being the Department of Justice, specifically the Civil Rights Division. This may be helpful if you want to learn more about the Americans with Disabilities Act or other requirements. Also available is the website for the Access Board. This is where the standards for ADA compliance can be found. And then the third link is for Federal Aid Essentials. These are small videos, typically 5 to 7 minutes long, and they cover all topics that are related to federal aid projects. A few websites that might be helpful to you provided for by the New York State Department of Transportation is general information on the CHIPS program. Now, while it says the CHIPS program, we hang all of the other programs off from that main page. So if you're looking for information for the Extreme Winter Recovery Program, Pave New York, or the new State Touring Route Program, go to that base page and you will be able to find all the information that has been discussed and covered in today's presentation. If you're looking for more information about curb ramp details and sidewalk installation, we've placed a link here for the New York State Department of Transportation's standard sheets, so you can go and find any details that you might need related to that. The next link is the Highway Design Manual, Chapter 18. This information is provided for pedestrian facility design, and if you have any questions on that, then we also have provided a link to our ADA coordinators who are located at least one in each region. And then the last link is to the Complete Streets Act. It gives you more information about this act and implementation and requirements. So we have some new contacts this year for the Local Programs Bureau. We have Dawn Arnold listed here. Dawn is the Assistant Director for the Local Programs Bureau. Margaret Nairns, and Margaret's going to be taking over the CHIPS, Pave New York, EWR, and State Touring Route programs, and Heather Gephardt, who is her trusted assistant, and you're going to be working with Heather in the future. So there's a few names missing today. So why are those few names missing today? Well, Peter Ryan has decided that it's an appropriate time for him to retire from state service. And while Peter wasn't able to attend with us today, he sends his regrets, but Peter will be retiring this summer, and so this is the last highway school for his career at DOT. We also, if you go to the next slide, we have a few new folks in the regions as well. So Miranda Roth is joining us in Syracuse, and I have to think, is it Jared?
No, Jim Kuzo.
Jim Kuzo in Region 5 is a new CHIPS rep. So you'll have the opportunity to meet those folks. A reminder again, we're going to have a Meet Your CHIPS Rep session on Thursday if you're able to join us with that. So here's listed your CHIPS reps. So we have Pete Ray in Albany, we have Chris Mosier in Utica, Miranda Roth in Syracuse, Lisa Coombs in Rochester, Jim Kuzo in Buffalo, Dawn Sutkin in Hornell, Jared Radley in Watertown, Danya Anazanzi, Poughkeepsie, sorry Danya, Linda Halliburka in Binghamton, Brian Kralj in Region 10, and then Sean Moore covers New York City for us. So the other change for us is that Steve Ainspan also has decided that this is an appropriate time for him to retire and leave our programs. I have known and worked with Steve for 14, almost 15 years running these programs, and I'm going to miss Steve immensely managing these programs, and I want to thank him for his many years of service, as I am sure that everyone on the phone will as well. And so at this time, I would like to let Steve say a few words, and then after Steve says a few words, we will take questions and answers.
Thank you, Diane. I appreciate your kind words. I would like to thank soon-to-be retired Peter Ryan for his leadership and dedicated service as Director of New York State DOT's Local Programs Bureau over the past 5 years. I would also like to thank two of our CHIPS reps, recently retired Dan Petrella from our Syracuse office and soon-to-be retired Ed Rakowski from our Buffalo office, for their years of dedicated service to the New York State Department of Transportation and the municipalities in their respective regions. At the same time, I would like to welcome Miranda Roth as Dan's replacement and Jim Cuso as Ed's replacement. As Diane just noted, our other regional CHIPS reps were noted on the slide, and I believe that nearly all of them will be attending Thursday's 11 a.m. Meet Your CHIPS Rep virtual session. After a very gratifying 40-year career with the New York State Department of Transportation, I plan to retire on September 29th. Over the past 30 years, I have had the good fortune to be affiliated with various local programs, most notably CHIPS, and it has been my pleasure and honor to work with and serve the needs of the Cornell Local Roads Program, the various statewide associations, our regional New York State DOT offices, and municipal officials across the state. I have particularly appreciated the cooperation that has been extended to me over the years by David Orr and his staff. As Diane noted, Margaret Nairns will be assuming my management responsibilities for the CHIPS, Pave New York, EWR, and Touring Route programs. You should feel confident that these programs will be very capably managed by Margaret. My best wishes to all of you. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we'll go into our Q&A, and we do have some questions here. The first question is there a list of equipment life expectancy pertaining to the CHIPS eligible reimbursement? There is a list of eligible equipment on our website with the usable service life associated with it. So if you go to that link that we identified on our website to go to CHIPS, there should also be a link from there to
Go to the.
can you go to the Q&A for me and pick up the rest of the questions?
Oh, sure.
So if you go to our website, you can get a list of equipment. I apologize, but of course my connection decided to go out at this particular moment, so we're grabbing Q&A.
The next question is, are all rollover funds guaranteed to be available the next fiscal year?
So how the rollover funds work each year is that the legislature has to reapportion them in the subsequent budget. To the best of my knowledge, in the last 14 and a half years that Steve and I have been working on these programs, the legislature has reapportioned those funds every year in the subsequent budget. There has not been a year when that hasn't happened. I can't guarantee that, but that is how the process has worked from there going forward.
Is there any chance the New York State DOT tourist-oriented directional or logo sign program can benefit in any way with regard to the state touring route program, more specifically regarding funding?
Okay, so the state touring route program is a formula-derived program where funding was identified for specific municipalities. Those municipalities were notified by letter that they received funding, so they are allowed to use that funding on any CHIPS eligible activity except purchasing equipment. So they may install any signs that are related to highways, bridges, and roadways. So hopefully I have answered that question. If not, put a clarification in the Q&A and we will address it.
Can we use CHIPS money exceeding the $350,000 cap to cover the town's 12%? Not sure what that's
I'm not-
referring to.
I'm not sure that I'm understanding that. The CHIPS, PAVE, EWR, and state touring route programs can match any federal aid project and other state projects. If you have a specific project in mind, then I would recommend you reach out to your CHIPS rep, provide the details, and they will consult main office and we can help them determine if you may use the funding on the project that you are thinking of. All right. Can multiple agencies purchase a piece of equipment through CHIPS funds, sharing the costs and still be reimbursed? I would recommend, DOT has to approve any vehicle purchase anyway. I would recommend you submit a proposal of who's going to pay for what and what's the equipment that's going to be purchased, and let us take a look at it and we can give you a response. And I would work through your CHIPS reps. So I think we have addressed all of the questions in the chat. The first one was about equipment. Yes, go to our CHIPS website, look up the list. It's a transportation equipment life list, and it has a list of the vehicles and their associated service life. Okay, so, and I've got the results from our poll. Will you be attending the CHIPS Regional Rep Networking Hour? And it looks like we have about 40% who say yes, they'll attend. 15% no, and then another 40% who aren't sure. Okay, so you know it's out there. If you haven't met your CHIPS rep, especially for those who have a new CHIPS rep and we're unable to meet in person, I know that that is an activity that we always enjoy, introducing you to your rep at our sessions. So I encourage you to participate on Thursday if you have time. I don't see any more questions. David, did you want to jump in and wrap us up for today?
I can. I have to admit I had to move my car, so I didn't hear. Did you talk about the fact that the touring route does not cover equipment?
I did.
Okay. I had to move the car. I was in the way of somebody. They didn't tow it, so that's good. So we're going to go ahead and we'll take our break. I do see someone's got their hand up. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A real quick, but we'll tie it up for the day. But we're not done with Highway School. What we're at now is there's an opportunity available. We're going to be doing a networking session. And if you would like to talk with your colleagues, join us. Depending how many people we've got, we may do breakout rooms. When you get there, we'll give you more details. It's a separate link. It's not the link you've been using today, because that link was for the sessions which are using the webinar feature in Zoom. This is a meeting feature, and you'll actually be able to talk with your colleagues and move around even a little bit. We're going to see how this works. We're going to start at the top of the hour at 11 o'clock, and we're going to start with a little bit of instructions, and we'll go from there. With that, I want to thank everybody. I walked too far away from my phone at one point, so I apologize for the staticky sound there. But other than that, we hope you got something out of this. And we hope those of you who are able to can come to the CHIPS thing on Thursday, and we'd love to see everybody at the top of the hour. So we'll talk to y'all at 11. The link is in the chat. If you want the link, since you've already got registered, since you're here, the link is in the chat. You can download that. And we will see you at 11 o'clock. It's a different, we're going to close this down. It's a different link you're going to need to go to. So we'll give them about another minute, Adam, to let them download that link.
Yep, we'll hang out here for a little bit, and you can download the link if you didn't already receive the email. And we have the networking hour already open and ready to go if you even want to get there early.
Okay, cool. Good to know. Okay, everybody. See y'all at the top of the hour.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm going to head on over, Adam.
And Amanda tells me that people are arriving, so everybody can feel free to head on over now.
Okay.
All right, take care, everybody. I'm gonna keep on here for just a few more seconds to let you all download or click the link, and then I'll shut down the feed for the day. Thank you all for being here.